Dear colleagues, please take your seats so that we can come to the wrap-up session of this historic first forum of the Standing Committee. It is our great pleasure to have with us the State Secretary, Mr. Federico Ramos de Armas, of the Environment and Agriculture and Food. Is that right? Ministry of Spain. Please, you have the floor.
Dear participants of this first forum of the Standing Committee on Finance, it has been a great honor for Spain to host this first forum of the Standing Committee on Finance that has been a great success. I'm absolutely confident that the focused discussions and the rich experiences shared throughout today have been of great interest to all participants and will allow drawing relevant lessons on this very challenging topic of scaling up resources for adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Climate change is one of the greatest challenges that the current societies are facing. But it's also true that the transition to a low-emission and resilient economy will allow countries to create jobs and make our economies more sustainable and competitive. The fight against climate change offers important opportunities that all countries need to realize for the sake of the global community, but also in our interest. We are all aware of the challenging economic circumstances that we are experiencing, but this cannot be an obstacle for us to continue discussing options to increase climate finance, sharing experiences and examples and how to scale up resources and how to ensure the effectiveness and efficiency in the delivery of adaptation and mitigation support. I have full confidence that discussions like the one we are closing today and the work being carried out by the Standing Committee and the work program on long-term finance, as well as the high-level political meetings like the one to be held in Barcelona in November, will provide valuable inputs to pave the way for the future climate regime and towards meeting the goal of mobilizing the $100 billion annually by 2020 through the reinforcement of existing sources of climate finance and unlocking new ones. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants gathered here today, experts, representatives of governments and institutions, and especially the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, for being here today and for trusting in Barcelona and in Spain to host this first historic forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Next, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Cristiana Figueres, Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC.
Thank you, Stefan. Buenas tardes, queridos amigos. Good afternoon to everyone. Is the microphone on? Yes? Good. Empiezo en español, porque es un placer tan grande estar en Barcelona, tierra de mis antepasados. Y creo que todos los latinos, de alguna manera, estamos aquí en la madre patria y celebramos la bienvenida que nos da la madre patria. Señor Secretario de Estado, don Federico Ramos de Armas, my dear friends Diane, Stefan, distinguished co-chairs of the Standing Committee on Finance, my good friend Niraj, thank you very much to all of you, to the World Bank Institute, and to the government of Spain for helping us organize this, this first forum. And congratulations on the first forum. From what I have heard, at least 97.3% of you have decided that this actually has been a useful exercise. So that is actually a pretty high rate. Now, my dear friends, climate finance. Is it important? Well, I don't think I need to repeat to you that climate finance is an absolutely critical part of the response to climate, and it is a trust-building exercise toward 2015, and it is basically what is going to enable or not the agreement that needs to go into effect by 2020. It is at the same time of all of the different institutions and all the different tools that are being created under the United Nations Climate Change Convention, it is the one that has less clarity. Hence, it is the one that is very, very clearly in urgent need of developing clarity. And just to up the pressure on all of you, there has to be very, very increased clarity by this COP in Warsaw, because climate finance was one piece that was not advanced sufficient at COP18, and it is very, very clearly the pillar that needs to be there for COP19. So, my dear friends, it will not surprise you that when I think of climate finance, I think of an acronym EMC, which could be Emergency Management Center, because this is the emergency right now. But it could also be interpreted a little bit more generously, and I know that this is very risky, because one thing that we are taught in the United Nations is never, never interpret what governments have written in a legal document. At the risk of doing what I know that I should not do, may I say that EMC could stand for, in this case, for encourage, monitor, and communicate. Because, Stefan and Diane, when I think of your standing committee, that's the way that I think of it. I think of your standing committee on finance as having three main activities. First, to encourage. And what do I mean by that? I mean exactly what you have seen today. The broad range of stakeholders, the broad range of sectors that are here in this room and that have had very helpful conversations today is already part of the encouragement that the Standing Committee is making to everyone involved in the challenge of climate finance. So we have heard from the NDBs, we have heard from national banks, we've heard from governments, we've heard from bilateral agencies, we've heard from in the private sector, we've heard everywhere from large-scale investors to crowdfunding, a very, very broad array of perspectives. In the encouraging part of the Standing Committee, it seems to me that we need two things to encourage. The first is, how does the Standing Committee on Finance, among other things through this forum, encourage innovative thinking, out-of-the-box thinking for both adaptation and mitigation? We need new financial instruments, or we even need new applications of current financial instruments, and we need to figure out what is the optimal blending of those financial instruments, because it is very clear that most of these activities will not occur if you only use one financial instrument, which presents a whole other challenge that I will talk about on monitoring. But the second challenge that we have under encouragement is, how do we strengthen the demand side? And you have talked about that today. How do we make sure that the projects are bankable? How do we improve the risk and return investment? A challenge in mitigation, but an even greater challenge in adaptation. But it absolutely needs to be the case that the absorptive capacity of developing countries needs to increase, and that means strengthen institutions and strengthen processes for that. Then in the EMC, let me use M for monitoring, or what you have been calling tracking during today. And there I know that you have discussed that it is important to have a common understanding of what it is that we're tracking, and that it is important to figure out the comparability between the various types of financing. To that, let me add one more challenge: comprehensiveness. That is going to be, I think, the heart of the challenge, because you're going to have to figure out comprehensive of what? What is the boundary of the universe that we're talking about? What kinds of financial flows is the Standing Committee going to track, and which ones are you not going to track? And those that you are going to track, how are you going to track them? How are you going to account for them? How are you going to compare one to the other? A huge, huge challenge for the Standing Committee. And on EMC, the C stands for communicate. And again, today you have had a fantastic example of what the Standing Committee already under Diane and Stefan is doing, and that is the multi-directional communication vessel, because it is about the Standing Committee learning from stakeholders and getting information, suggestions, ideas from stakeholders. It is about the stakeholders understanding what the Standing Committee is doing. And it is also about stakeholders understanding and learning from each other, because it is this kind of conversation that actually is the most fertile ground for new ideas in the future. So let me just conclude by congratulating Stefan and Diane and Niraj for this very, very excellent first start. I know that you conclude yourselves that it is very clear that there is currently insufficient funding to keep us under 2 degrees, hopefully under 1.5 degrees, but that a lot is being done, and that we can and we must learn from all of the different experiments, all of the different experiences and knowledge that is already on the ground, to apply it to this new challenge that we have on board. With that, let me thank you all for coming to beautiful Barcelona. I'm sorry that the weather is still cold for you. We will try to do something about that tomorrow. But thank you very, very much for your input. Thank you for supporting the Standing Committee. Thank you for supporting the climate process. And thank you for all the work you have done. Above all, thank you for all the work that I know you will continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiana. Next, Niraj. And I have to say, without him and his team and World Bank Institute, it would have been, should I say, impossible to have this event here today. So thanks again, and the floor is yours.
Good evening. Secretary of State Ramos, Madam Executive Secretary, Diane and Stefan, co-chairs of the Standing Committee, members of the Standing Committee, ladies and gentlemen. It's normally impossible to come after Christiana and hold the crowd's attention for any sort of significant amount of time. Today it's especially so because we've been listening to each other all day, and I'm sure you're tired of people talking. But let me just say 3 things very quickly, because this is Barcelona, and at 6:30, the day is just starting. So I'm sure all of you have plans for the evening, and I'm sure they do not include people speaking at you while you sit around without a drink in your hands. The first thing I'd like to do is thank those who need to be thanked. If I start taking names, I'm sure I'll leave out someone and make an enemy for life. So you know who you are, but the teams from the Secretariat and the World Bank Institute do need some mention. The help we got from AITA needs mention. The members of the Standing Committee who encouraged us to take on what seemed quite impossible at times also need mention, but I'll not embarrass them by naming anyone. You could ask, why WBI? What are we doing here? Who are we? We are the capacity development arm of the World Bank Group. So we use the platforms of knowledge and learning, of collaborative governance, of innovation, to further the objectives of development. to seek solutions for climate change. But where solutions exist, we can talk about structuring them into learning. Where they do not exist that clearly, we can talk of incubation to try and surface them. Where the solutions are at best talked about, we hope that bringing together practitioners to talk to each other will deliver some of these solutions. We have various platforms, and I hope that in the future we'll get a chance to talk to you about them and perhaps demonstrate how effectively they can be used. But that's where we came from. We thought that this was an incredibly important conversation that needed to take place, and I'm glad to see so many people still standing at the end of the day. Well, it is a standing committee. I suppose I shouldn't say that too much. What do we take away from today? I'd like to finish on that note. At Expo this week, we do seek to explore solutions to an incredibly complex issue, the sort of the future of climate and carbon markets. And we thought that this was an excellent opportunity because there are going to be so many people here to try and have an event like this on the margins or just ahead of it so that we could take advantage of the fixed costs versus the variables. I feel that what we've done today is to have brought together more than 100 people, people who are probably the most focused participants who need to be in this conversation because they've taken the trouble to come to the Expo from all over the world. To give you a kind of a day-long snapshot of the various aspects and facets of climate financing, it's not just FIs, it's not just funds, it's not just bankable projects. There's a lot more that you need to keep on your radar when you talk about this topic. And we hope that you got a flavor of that today. Earlier today, there was a lot of conversation about two sides of a coin and things like that. I think our coin has like 50, 60 sides, and you can never win a toss with it. But it is complex. But hopefully, this day's deliberations will help to put a few things in perspective and point you in directions where we feel that more collaboration, more consultations might provide you solutions that will otherwise elude the process. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Niraj. And the last word to my co-chair, Diane.
Okay. Thank you, Stefan. We would just like to, Stefan and I would just like to say thank you, Mr. Minister, for hosting us here in Spain. Thank you for your kind words. Even with the cold weather, we had a good time. And we're still going to have a good time later. Thank you very much for that. Christiane, thank you for your encouragement. We learned a lot today, so we'll be speaking as co-chairs, and on behalf of the committee, we have a lot to bring back to the COP in Warsaw. And we believe that many of our members are finance negotiators are here, and we just have to say that we as finance negotiators learned a lot from the members here, from the private sector, private banks, microfinancing, and others that we think we can bring into the process. We would like to thank AITA, the WBI for their assistance, and Christian, I would just like to thank you for your staff. They have been excellent in putting together something very quickly. As usual. We can say this part over and over again. It'll still be the same in a year from now, 6 months from now. What we would like to say is that one of the things that we saw in this first forum is that we spoke about financing from the consumer level all the way up to the billion-dollar project levels. And what we discovered here today, the biggest thing that we have to resolve is that we talked about push and pull. Paul, I'll use your terms, push and pull. There's a lot of pushing, and there's a lot of pulling, but some way it's not connecting. We're not connecting. There's a huge market for mitigation, smaller market for adaptation, and there is a huge amount of funding that needs to be spent. From a woman perspective, that's driving me crazy. We have a lot of things to buy, a lot of money to buy, and we're not connecting the dots. So we believe that there is something that we have to do. Maybe this forum will help to get the financiers and the projects together. And I think that is something that we could do at the Climate Change Convention that will make us relevant. That's another issue. Nobody really said it from the floor, but we understand that from the private sector perspective, when the person's with the money, they will fall asleep in 10 minutes at a COP. They would not understand what we're doing.
Are you sure?
I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure about that. But I think that as, within the Standing Committee on Finance, we will be looking at ways to recommend to the COP how we can be more relevant. And with respect to that, we think the forum will be the place for that. What's next with the forum? Saeed here had chaired our smaller group on the forum from the Standing Committee on Finance. And we'll have to say thank you to our committee members. Once again, I'll remind you, for those who are participating in the Climate Change Convention, we are negotiators that negotiate opposite each other. And as a committee, we had to work together to get this done. And I would just like to say that we have respected each other's boundaries and still managed to work as a team. So that has been excellent. Stefan and I enjoy working, co-chairing this group. What's next? I can't say up front, but we had a few recommendations. Everybody's excited about the forum in the future. They want it to be more than one day. And they would like it to be alongside other events for next year. The SCF had asked us, the Jeff is interested. And by the way, the SCF meeting is going to be in Jamaica. So you can't say no to 3 days in Jamaica. Sure. As the committee members, we understand that it puts a lot of stress on the countries to give you literally 2 months, a few months notice. And we're hoping to bring to the COP our concrete suggestions about the forum, our fora for next year, and have the COP make a decision very early so that we can all plan and we all can be there. And I think some of the comments we have received is that we need to see more private sector participation at all levels, consumer level, as well as the big projects. So we'd just like to thank everyone. We've learned a lot, and we are definitely going to take our report back and feed it back into the COP at Warsaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do not want to let you go without reminding you that we have either already up or pretty soon a website, virtual forum, where you will find the presentations and where you are encouraged to bring in your knowledge, your papers, your documents, your slides, and it may be inhabited by more than the people that were here. From my side, again, thank you to all of you. Thank you for active participation, not only active by talking, but also by listening. So I believe we had a very good first forum, and we look forward to continue our dialogue in a form or another. With that, I wish you an enjoyable evening. Hope to see some of you tomorrow or the day after in these premises, and if it's not here, at one of the other stops of the climate change and climate finance caravan. Thank you very much.